about Buddhism and our opportunity to try to give responses based on the Buddha's teachings. So please feel free to type in questions at any time, and we will respond to questions as we see them. So hello to the people checking in so far. Hello to Amparo, Kauser Friend, Sud, Jerry, Uttara, Gregory, Maria, and whoever else is watching. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha, and then we'll read through some questions and give some answers. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Okay, so our first question here is from Sud, who says, if you are too distracted to meditate, is there still benefit to chanting 108 Itipiso or chanting Karaniya Metta Sutta, etc.? If so, what are some benefits? Ayasobana, would you like to speak to this one?
Sure. Just a few weeks ago, we looked, I'm sorry, my memory for sutta names is not as good as others. The sutta that speaks about bringing up an inspiring object when a person is too restless or too sluggish to be able to be successful in meditation. And it's explicitly given that's what's called the directed meditation. So what's called the undirected meditation is when one is able to go into normal satipatthana, normal anapanasati, or whatever the practice is, without having that requirement to direct the mind towards contemplating about a particular theme, which is inspiring and uplifting. So meditation is supported by joy. Joy is supported by faith, if you have faith. And doing this type of chanting is meant to arouse that kind of joy and faith.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Ayasobana. And there's another question here. So Ryan Martin says, if you could talk to your teen selves, but with today's typical teen problems with social media, self-identification views, wokeness, etc., what would you say to that teen that could paradigm shift your thinking towards Buddhist teachings, and what teaching would you begin with? Well, I mean, it's a bit difficult to talk about hypothetical situations like this because when I was a teenager, I had a very different approach to the world than I do now. But probably the number one thing I would recommend is avoid social media. Like social media, what does it actually do to the mind? Mostly nothing good. Mostly it just makes the mind messy and uncomfortable. And it's very difficult to use social media in a way which is actually uplifting rather than a way which is crushing. And the other standard recommendation I would give to my teen self, which is pretty much actually irrelevant depending upon time and place, is to constantly observe our experience through the Four Noble Truths. Look for dukkha, look for the underlying desire, aversion, delusion that's causing the dukkha, and work on eradicating those root defilements. I think that's the basic advice I would give to my teen self. Ayasobana, do you have any thoughts on this question? Would you like to say something on the matter?
Okay. One of the common problems I see among people, but especially among college students and younger people, is all the dukkha that comes from their identity issues. And it can be unskillful to tell somebody you're suffering because you identify in a particular way. But if they could learn how to take whatever the issue is and reframe it in a way which is impersonal. So instead of thinking I'm a victim of racism, if you could just say, okay, racism is dukkha, making it not personal like that. That's the way to get out of that.
Also, one thing that comes to mind, which this was already starting to be an issue actually when I was a teenager, but it's gotten a lot worse in the last 20 years. So one piece of advice I would really give to my teen self is to be extremely cautious about psychopharmaceuticals. So to explore lifestyle changes and alternative treatments and changes in diet, changes in ways of living, which address whatever mood issues or motivation issues or whatever, rather than going directly to pharmaceutical solutions. I think that while there's value to pharmaceuticals, I think they're massively overprescribed. And the consequences I see in people trying to practice Buddhism is, again, maybe for people who aren't trying to cultivate the mind, for people who aren't practicing meditation, for people who aren't trying to progress towards awakening, I think it's maybe not so relevant. But for people who are over-medicated tend to have a much more difficult time making progress in their practice. And these days, I think a lot of people are over-medicated. So again, sometimes I do actually think that psychopharmaceuticals are sometimes helpful and sometimes relevant, but I do think they're massively overprescribed and they're often counterproductive for many practitioners. So I would encourage my teen self to be hesitant and cautious and to explore alternative treatment methods. And then we have a question here. Anna Maria says, did the Buddha meditate with eyes open? Did he encourage it? Ayasobana, would you like to talk about meditating with eyes open versus eyes closed?
I'm not aware of that specific instruction in the suttas about eyes open or eyes closed. In particular, when somebody is sleepy, there is the recommendation in the sutta to meditate on light. And as it's understood in the commentary, that would involve looking at a bright object and getting the image of light in the mind and then taking that into meditation. Although I'm not really for sure if that's an accurate reading of the meaning of bringing up light when meditating. I've always experienced myself without any particular concentration that awareness itself seems to be a kind of light. Other than that, if you're, it can be helpful to meditate with the eyes open in order to stay awake. And if you're restless, it can be good to close the eyes in order to reduce distractions.
Yeah, similarly, I don't think there's anywhere in the suttas where the Buddha specifically says one or the other, which to me indicates that it wasn't important to him. I think you just do whatever works. And Anis says, is it wise to learn from Padmasambhava's approach to transform harm? I personally have no idea what Padmasambhava taught on the subject, and I actually don't know much about Padmasambhava's teachings in general. Ayasobana, do you have any familiarity with this?
Even if I did, I think I'm not qualified to speak about that teaching.
Okay, fair enough. So Anis, I think we'll have to set your question aside. And Vivek says, there's a recording where you talk about karma, its lack of connection to a persistent self. I understand there is not persistent self, but aren't we, each of us, who experience the results of karma? Perhaps you can expand on this concept in detail, because the video on this idea confused me more. Well, so the concept of there not being a persistent self is more that there's nothing anywhere in body and mind which has ongoing, lasting existence, and therefore nothing whatsoever which is our true self or our true nature. Nonetheless, there is clearly a causal connection from one moment to the next, and there also clearly are choices being made which have corresponding consequences. And some choices will incline the mind towards awakening, and some will incline the mind away from it. So this doesn't require the existence of a persistent, ongoing self in order to observe a chain of causality and a connection, a causal connection between one moment and the next. So I actually don't see the teachings on karma as necessitating the existence of a persistent self. Rather, each moment creates the conditions which influence the following moment. But that doesn't mean that there's only one moment. Rather, it means that there are multiple separate moments which are related through causality. Ayasobana, do you have anything to say on this matter?
Yes, that in particular, the Buddha very regularly used language in line with a conventional self when he was speaking about ethical matters, encouraging people to be responsible, to make decisions. Even there's one sutta with the line, others may kill, but I do not kill, and so forth like that. So in that way, with your conventional self, you have the agency to make choices about the actions that you do. But that still does not necessitate carrying that forward to having a concept of an eternal or essential permanent self.
Good. And Ryan says, regarding the six sense bases, I'm hearing that understanding of the six senses is also a way to liberation. Is this correct, and how? Ayasobana, would you like to talk about this? Six senses as a way to liberation?
There's 3 suttas near the back of the Majjhima Nikaya about the 6 senses. The Chachaka Sutta, Salai Atana Vibhanga Sutta, and one more. And so the main thing about the senses is that the senses are associated with contact. And contact is associated with feeling. Feeling is associated with craving. So there's that nexus there, which is lightning fast. It's so fast, it's almost impossible to discern any interval between the contact and craving. So if one can develop the acute analytical insight, which is able to subdivide those 3 aspects of the experience that we have with contact of the 6 senses, then that can disarm the cascade that's going towards craving, and the contact is just a contact. The sense is just a sense. Doesn't have to lead to more suffering.
Yeah, there's also the famous Bahya Sutta, where the Buddha makes a very direct statement. He says, one should train oneself to understand that in the seen there is just the seen, in the heard there is just the heard, in the cognized there's just the cognized, and so on. And the Buddha says, when we see clearly in this way, then there is no me here or there or anywhere in between, and this is the end of suffering. So here the Buddha is talking about observing the 6 senses as being a natural process, a process of nature. and seeing it not as me or mine, but just as a natural process unfolding based on causality. And that if we do so, then naturally we will relinquish self-centeredness and attain awakening. Then Sud has a question: can every situation of personal suffering be looked at in terms of the Four Noble Truths? Or are there types of physical body suffering that are not related to the Four Noble Truths? Ayasobana, what do you think about this topic? So the relationship between Four Noble Truths and all manner of suffering.
Pleasant feelings are related to the body as well as related to the mind. And that is not necessarily leading to a dukkha. It's merely an unpleasant feeling. I take the Four Noble Truths as being not just facts that are real, but a way of looking at everything. So if we recognize what dukkha is, how it arises, where it comes from, and we've got a good, strong intuitive sense, if the mind is locked into taking the bait and grasping onto something in a way that's the cause of suffering, and you're able to recognize that easily, then with every situation you can figure out like where you're at within the Four Noble Truths. So if you recognize that dukkha has arisen for you, then you need to take that as a learning opportunity. Say, oh, my life has revealed to me this opportunity to see and understand that dukkha, and to discern where that dukkha is coming from, what I'm grasping onto, and to have an opportunity to let go of that, and to find out for myself whether letting go of that grasping reduces or eliminates that bit of dukkha. So in that way, dukkha it's a definite method of learning from experience.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and I think it's important to make a distinction between, between unpleasant experiences, or rather between sensation, let's say, a distinction between sensation and the desire and aversion which springs up from delusion. So enlightened beings also have sensations, but they don't have suffering. And that's because they don't have desire, aversion, and delusion in relationship to those sensations. So the body is always producing sensations, but it is only felt as suffering when it's experienced through defilement and delusion. So in that sense, then, anytime you're experiencing suffering, it's because of a failure to understand and apply the Four Noble Truths. It's an indication that there's some defilement operating there. We have a question from Jenny, who says, where are you from? Well, I am American. I believe Ayasobana is also American. Is that correct?
I'm from Iowa.
Yeah.
And so if you want to, you could call me Iowa.
Uh-huh. That would be very, actually, traditional Sri Lankan. They call monks by their place of origin. So I'm currently in Italy, but yeah, both of us are American. But ultimately, where are we from? We're from beginningless time, this beginningless cycle of birth and death. Same place we're all from. So Hivan says, sometimes I hear people in other traditions talk about exhausting or burning off karma. I don't often hear that in Theravada teachings. Can you explain how process of karma results come to an end? Well, so in the suttas, we do see the Buddha talking about karma as a process where we make a choice, a decision, an intentional action, and that then produces a corresponding result. And the result is caused by whatever choice we made. And the intensity, strength, and duration of that result is directly dependent upon the potency of whatever choice we initially made. So in that sense, when we experience any kind of unpleasant or uncomfortable experience, well, then that is some of our old bad karma expressing its result. So in that sense, it is exhausted or burnt off, just through the sense that it's expressing its result. However, the Buddha was also clear that you can't expect to attain awakening by just waiting around for all your old karma to burn off. And you also can't attain awakening by trying to speed up the process of wearing out your old karma. That was actually one of the non-Buddhist practices at the time in ancient India, where people who were deliberately inflicting pain on themselves, thinking that by getting more pain in the present moment, they could burn off their old bad karma more quickly. But the Buddha said, actually, that doesn't work. All you're doing is actually making even more bad karma. By inflicting pain on yourself, you're not burning off old karma, you're actually just making more new karma, which will keep you stuck in the cycle even longer. So the only way to actually eliminate the process of karma is through attaining full awakening. It's through purifying the heart of greed, hatred, and delusion. It's through relinquishing self-centeredness. Because then karma no longer has a place to stick. It no longer has a place to land. So that's the only way to be free of the cycle of karma. Ayasobana, do you have any thoughts on burning off karma or bringing the process of karma to an end?
You said it exactly, Bhante.
Okay, so we can look at the next question. Kate says, I would like to start reading the suttas a little every day. There is so much. Where to start? Any suggestions on how to file away or organize what has been read and refer to it later by topic? Ayasobana, would you like to talk about approaching the suttas?
I've heard Bhante should also recommend starting with the middle-length discourses, but skip the first discourse and start with number 2. Read the remainder of the book and then come back and read the first discourse in that book. That's one way of doing it, or else one could read whichever book you have, or whichever book you can find, or if you take a bit of a taste and see which book is easier or more lovable to work with, and you can start almost anywhere. As far as saving ideas, I strongly recommend keeping a sutta diary where you would, in longhand on a paper journal, copy out a sentence from the sutta that strikes you as being meaningful. And then eventually you can build up a whole journal of meaningful sentences from the suttas that you can refer to later. It's not necessary to expound on what your opinion is at that particular moment, because your opinion is going to change. But collecting the references that the things that were meaningful to you at the time is really helpful.
Okay, good. Yeah, and Kate, I'd just add to that there's 2 really important things I recommend on sutta reading. First off is read cover to cover. Don't skip anything. Don't bounce around. And second, read every day. If you keep those 2 principles in mind, then you'll be all right. And then Amparo says, please explain the food contemplation, particularly the part of not eating for pleasure. Does this mean not to enjoy your food? So Amparo, the food contemplation, so not for fun, not for pleasure, not for beautification, only for the health and maintenance of this body and for supporting our spiritual practice. This is what the Buddha recommends. So what is the purpose of eating food? Well, food, first and foremost, food is medicine. So food, the purpose of food is to support the health of the body. And why do we support the health of the body? Because having a healthy body is supportive to doing our spiritual practice. So this is why we eat food in a Buddhist context. If we're trying to really follow the Buddha's instructions closely, then we relate to food as something that supports the health of our body and supports our spiritual practice. So rather than looking at food as a source of sensual pleasure, which would just be based on desire and would just fuel more desire, Instead, we relate to food as a way to keep our body healthy and a way to support our spiritual practice. And in the process of doing so, sometimes you will have pleasant taste. Sometimes you will have unpleasant taste. Sometimes you will have pleasant texture. Sometimes you will have unpleasant texture. That's okay. Just don't make a problem out of it. Just remember why we're eating food in the first place. We're eating food to maintain the health of the body and to sustain our spiritual practice. That's all. Ayasobana, anything you'd like to add on the topic?
Only that food is one of the most profound areas where an ordinary person does experience craving for sensual pleasure, and it's one of the most challenging things to overcome. It's one's addiction to watching movies or listening to shows or something is much easier to dispel than the issues that could arise around food. So we do that contemplation because it's important.
Okay. And Sud says, do I make bad karma if I make an adhitthana and try to go through it, but then it collapses after a while, like meditating a certain number of hours per day, etc.? Sud, I would say that it's not necessarily bad karma. If you make the original determination with good intentions, then that's good karma. And if you then try to follow on that good intention, then that's more good karma. And then if at some point you, just out of sheer laziness or apathy or craving to do something else, you then decide to give up on your determination, well, that's not good karma. In fact, that might be bad karma at that point. But the initial determination is still good karma, and every time you act well upon it, that's also further good karma. But I would say that part of the skill of determinations is making realistic determinations. If you decide one day, I'm going to meditate 16 hours a day for the next year. Well, I mean, if you live in a retreat center, that might be realistic. It might not. Even then, it might not be realistic, depending on the center. But in any other circumstance, it's just not realistic. So as a lay person with a family and a busy life, you might find even meditating 1 hour a day is a bit too much of a determination. So you want to be realistic when making determinations. Make a determination which is going to maintain your edge or maybe push it a little bit, but don't make a determination which is so intense that you won't be able to keep it up for long, because then you'll just get discouraged. So I do think making determinations can be supportive, but it's usually better to make small, manageable determinations rather than to make something that's too big. And also give yourself the opportunity to reevaluate. So rather than saying, oh, I'm going to meditate 4 hours a day for the next year, maybe something like, I'm going to meditate 4 hours a day for the next week. And then after a week, I will reevaluate. So actually then really try to keep it up for a week. And then maybe at the end of the week, you're like, well, this was too much. I should go down to 3 hours or 2 hours or 1 hour. Well, that's fine. So being realistic when making the original determination so that you don't bite off more than you can chew. Ayasobana, anything you'd like to add on the topic?
That's good.
Okay. And then Ryan says, contemplation on the six senses. Seems I've been working really hard at optimizing each sense base for maximum pleasure seeking. Is it correct to assume that through the senses, we create our views of our identities? Ayasobana, would you like to respond to this?
This is a bit of a confusion that I've noticed sometimes in insight meditation circles or with beginners. If one has been like continuously distracted and absorbed or obsessed with our different worries and so forth, and then we learn to be mindful, it can be that the sense contact is more intense and more bright, so that the sensation of the body, the sensation of the chair you're sitting on, the sensation of the smell of the flower, the color of a flower, and all of those things seem more clear when the mind is mindful and not distracted. But that's not the purpose. So what you really need to work on is having a very detached and equanimous attitude toward the different ways that the sense experience can come through. So if the flower seems to be extremely pink, and it's a really bright and strong experience of the pinkness of the flower, then you can say, okay, it is what it is, without getting excited about it. And if the smell or the appearance of vomit is very bad, then in the same way, you also don't get excited by that. So it is a side effect of meditation that sense contact can seem to be more strong and more clear, and then we learn to be equanimous about that. It's true, the mind can create a self out of anything. So we certainly create a view of identities around sense contacts.
And Aldo asks, any suggestions regarding the contemplation of impermanence? Well, I see Aldo every day here in Italy, so maybe Ayasobana, you could answer Aldo's question, please.
In particular, the great question of life and death is a very important aspect of the contemplation of impermanence. So realizing that the person you are today, meaning that body which is made of meat and different fluids that came from your mother and father, and which is nourished with food, that person is impermanent and is going to come to an end. And overcoming the upset, fear, and aversion towards that basic fact of life is super important. Then beyond that, the contemplation of impermanence towards all of the things we can experience helps us to defeat emotional reactions. So if something is pleasant, when we see it's impermanent, we don't get too happy about it. When something is unpleasant, we know it's impermanent, and we then don't have to be too upset or disturbed about it.
Okay, good, thank you. And Gregory says, when meditating, I sometimes find it hard to map what is happening to what is described in the suttas. What criteria should one use to evaluate if one's practice is on the right path? Well, Gregory, my recommendation is to keep things very simple. So one of the frameworks I find really helpful is to just evaluate. Am I experiencing an increase in one or more of the 7 factors of awakening? Am I experiencing a decrease in one or more of the 5 hindrances? If so, then you're on the right track. On the other hand, if one or more of the 5 hindrances is increasing and one or more of the 7 factors is decreasing, then you're probably on the wrong track. So this is the basic framework, which I think is pretty much always relevant, and it's not too complicated. Usually when people are getting confused, it's around different interpretations of what jhana is and different interpretations of stages of awakening. But if you keep it to the basics, increase of the wholesome, decrease of the unwholesome. What is the wholesome? 7 factors of awakening. What is the unwholesome? 5 hindrances. Keep it to the basics, and then you won't go wrong. And this can bring you all the way to the end of the path. Ayasobana, anything further you'd like to say on the matter?
There are so many words that have been written about meditation and about the path and the way of practice, and it is beneficial to read and ponder about all of those many teachings in a way, then as that cognitive knowledge gets integrated and synthesized, then you could forget about it and intuitively be able to recognize if you're going in the right direction or not.
Okay, and then Vivek says, sometimes when meditating, my body starts to involuntarily move back and forth. What is that? I mean, I personally don't think it's particularly significant as long as one is clearly mindful of the body, clearly aware of the body, and one is not deliberately moving the body. I would just encourage you to be really clearly aware of your body and really make sure you're not moving it in some way. Because usually during meditation, the body becomes increasingly peaceful and still. So usually if the body is moving around, there's some volitional component there. Either we're experiencing a loss of awareness, a reduction in mindfulness, which is then allowing for movement to creep in. Or sometimes we're bored or we're spacing out and we start moving around out of boredom or spaciness. So I would just make sure that you're very alert and clearly aware of your whole body in detail, and that you're not deliberately moving the body at all. And just allow the body to relax and settle into stillness, and it will usually do so. Ayasobana, do you have any thoughts on this involuntary movement during meditation?
Indeed, not to make it a problem. So it doesn't have to be a problem, so don't make it a problem. At the same time, it may be that bodily movement, as well as movements of the mind, can happen when, whether it's because of being tired or losing one's intention, then the mind starts to run around. So if a person would have, it's like the only job in meditation is to be aware, well, to be aware and to let go of clinging. And whatever is happening, be aware of it. And you do need to have a certain amount of energy for that, but the amount of energy or force or exertion that you need is very minimal. That's why meditation is relaxing. Therefore, I think it would be counterproductive to try to control the body, to rigidly keep it still, but at the same time to recognize that when the body starts to move, it could be because the mindfulness has slipped away, and then to come back to mindfulness.
Okay, good. And Ryan asks, do all 40 meditation objects lead to jhanas? Is it wise to strive to obtain jhana through each of these 40 objects as into achieving a complete and holistic Buddhist training? I don't think it matters. I think if you can pick one and do well with one, then that's plenty. Ayasopana, what do you think?
I would say it would be unwise to try to master all 40 objects of meditation up to jhana, because that would be making things too complicated.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fine to experiment with different methods, but usually you'll figure out a small number of techniques that work pretty well for you, and you'll spend most of your time just doing that small number of techniques. Yeah, I don't think you need to master all 40. There's also more than 40, by the way. 40 is a traditional number, but there's actually more than that. So I wouldn't bother trying to master every single one of them. Then Ryan says, regarding optimization of the six senses, clarification, I meant I was identifying myself through the music I heard, the food I ate, the sites I visited, etc., then creating a hyper-ego from these best experiences. Is this correct contemplation of six senses linked to views of self? I do think that's an example of how we can reinforce our self-identity based upon sensory experiences. I do think that is an example of how we inject self-centeredness into sensory experience. Isobana, what are your thoughts on this?
Actually, I have an idea that I've not heard very much from teachers, and that is coming back to this idea of the conventional self. So the conventional self is continuously coming up and constantly changing. It's almost like something that's like a flickering, so that when, like say, sitting in meditation, the conventional self seems to be almost like completely disappeared, and then a dog barks and the self comes back. And it's very useful to be able to observe what's happening with that. But just because, in a way, self came back when the dog barked, does not mean that you've clinging to a delusion of the self. It's just that the conventional self comes up. And this is one of the things that's happening with sense contact. So if you kind of like don't be faulting yourself with the conventional self that you use every day, but just see how that's constantly changing so that you can defeat your clinging and delusion about that.
Good. Yep. And then Sud says, I had a very, very peaceful experience once out of nowhere. I'm trying to recreate that extremely peaceful experience, but I'm unable to do so. Should I just keep increasing time of meditation, or is it sila, or is it related to something else? Just relax. Don't bother trying to recreate any specific experience from the past. Just keep cultivating wholesome causes, and eventually you will experience the positive results. But in Buddhism, we're really focused on just germinating the good causes. Just keep planting good seeds. And inevitably, you will get the harvest. But most of our practice is not about expecting the harvest. We just keep planting good seeds in the mind. So yeah, morality, kindness, generosity, precepts, self-restraint, those are all really helpful. Practicing long periods of meditation, very helpful. Studying the suttas, very helpful. Doing Buddhist chanting, very helpful. Having Dhamma conversations, very helpful. These are all good seeds to plant. But don't waste your time trying to chase after a specific memory of a specific experience that happened to you once. Just keep planting good seeds. And then one day, might be tomorrow, might be 10 years from now, but one day, you'll sit down to do some meditation, and your mind will be very peaceful, very joyful, very sharp. And that's because it will be the right time for that to happen. In the meantime, you just keep planting the causes. And don't worry so much about when the results are going to come. Ayasobana, anything further?
On the other hand, if you're following a method to be successful in meditation, it's good to recollect what you were aiming for and what happened. And then if you experience some success in meditation, to then see whether following a similar approach is successful again and again. And that way we can build up some skillfulness with meditation. That's not quite the same thing as chasing after some experience that seemed to come from nowhere. But those experiences that came from nowhere, like you were cultivating mindfulness, and it was because of your mindfulness that you noticed that moment so clearly.
Good. Thank you, Aya. And that looks like the last question. So if there's no other questions, then maybe we'll conclude at this time. So I think we can go ahead and wrap up at this time. So thank you, Aya Sobana, for your delightful Dhamma teachings. And thank you to all the participants for your wonderful Dhamma questions. So we can conclude at this time with three. So we'll conclude with three sadhus together. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, and we'll see you all next time.